Hello everybody, welcome to another Arturia live stream. This Thursday afternoon we are taking you for a little journey on music production workshop one more time, and this time we are talking about BeatStep Pro, one of the coolest and most known products from the step range, which was introduced a few years ago already, and it was enough for it to become quite of a classic sequencer in its own range. And today the plan is to go through its features, talk about it from the creative side of view, point of view. I'm gonna show you a little bit of its cool features, and then we're gonna see how it can be a great match for the studio as well as for a live stage. So without further ado, let's get into it. One more thing, at the end we're gonna do some questions, some Q&A, so make sure to ask some questions if you have some in the chat on Facebook and YouTube, and then my friends will pass it over on to me, and then I'll try to answer those. So yeah, BeatStep Pro. You probably have heard about it because it's been quite some time that it's on the market. What it is, it's a very advanced controller and sequencer. As a controller, it actually provides some really cool features that you can take advantage of. So basically, if you would like to use it as a controller, all you have to do is you have to go to the control mode, and then suddenly all those knobs and all those buttons become available for you to use them and assign them and work with them within your DAW or within your hardware synths. So all of those are mappable. You can determine the numbers in the MIDI control center that I'm going to show you later on. And yeah, it's just very cool if you would like to control your external devices, if you would like to assign some knobs to cut off or other parameters from your hardware instruments, as well as DAW and software instruments, which actually I'm doing now, and I'll show you in a second. And outside of that, it provides 3 tracks of sequencing. So there are 2 melodic tracks, sequencer 1, sequencer 2, and there is a 3rd additional sequencer, which is a drum sequencer. The way my setup works is that I am using 2 melodic sequencers to trigger Microfreak and Mini Brute 2S. So I have a bass sound on the track number 1, on the track number 2, I have the key sound that comes from Microfreak. And all of this is done by using the MIDI out from BeatStep Pro. So on the back panel, maybe I can show this to you without any harm. I don't know if you can see it, but on the back panel there is a lot of connectivity. You can use MIDI, the 3 tracks via MIDI, but you can also utilize the CV connections that are available on the on the back panel for all of the 3 tracks. So basically, outside of triggering your instruments via MIDI, you can also use the pitch, velocity, and gate for track number 1 and 2 to trigger those parameters within your analog synthesizers that operate with CV voltages. You also have 8 drum tracks to trigger drum sounds in the drum machines. You also have a clock in and out and MIDI in and out. So right now I am using the MIDI out to go from BeatStep Pro to Microfreak, and then from Microfreak I go further to control the Minibird 2S on another channel. So by default the track number 1 is set to MIDI channel number 1, track number 2 is connected to channel number 2, and the drum sequencer goes to channel number 10 as by default. And so the drum channel is actually used to trigger the software instruments. So if you look at my computer, you can see that I have a drum rack here with some samples and some sounds. So the drum channel goes through USB. So I can send the MIDI and USB signals at the same time to control both software and hardware instruments. So that's the setup. Let me maybe play some drums for you so you can hear it. Sounds like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna one more thing. In the control mode, I was supposed to say, if you can look at my screen again on my computer, as I said before, it is very easy and possible to control various MIDI parameters with those knobs. So as you can see on all of the tracks, I am actually controlling the sends for that have reverb and the delay, and these are actually the FX collection effects. So maybe let me show you how it sounds on Microfreak. So as you can see, that's pretty convenient because I can control Microfreak from the track number 1 and still use the control mode to add a bit of effects that are utilized in the DAW. And so, as you can imagine, once as the sequence is playing, I can just go. So now it's very dry, and I'm messing up with the sequence maybe a little bit. I'm trying to change some parameters, the pitch information, and then I go to the control mode, and now I suddenly added some delay and reverb, and it all sounds beautiful. And now I can come back and again mess with my sequence. So as you can see, BeatStep Pro is a perfect combination to trigger both the hardware and software instruments. So maybe let me just briefly talk about the features and the structure of this machine. So as I said, there are 3 tracks that you can use, and they provide you with a 64-step sequence. There are 16 patterns that are available within each track, and also it is worth mentioning that there are projects available for you as well. So you can think about it as in a DAW, when you have a project, for example, you're working on a project and then you work on another project. So it's the same here. You have 16 projects available. So to trigger a project, to find a project that you like, all you have to do is to press the project and then simply use the step buttons to go through all of your projects. These can be stored and used in the computer. So if you see the MIDI control center here, I have a BeatStep Pro connected to it, and everything can be stored and saved in your computer. So if you're working on the BeatStep Pro in one place in your world and then you travel somewhere, you might want to save your patterns and then download those from another computer to your device. So that's pretty handy. And if you combine all of those numbers, it's 16 projects, and then within each of the 3 tracks you have 16 patterns as well. So you can do the math. It's possibly tens of thousands of different combinations and possibilities that you can make use of. So how do we trigger sounds? How do we make some music on it? So the way it works is that below the step buttons in each track, there are pads that resemble the structure of a keyboard. So if you look closely at those pads, you can see that they are lighting up on the melodic tracks in the same way that resembles the keyboard. So if I play those, it's a scale that you can recognize and remember from the keyboard. So it's very easy to learn and then keep on using those as a keyboard, which you know is very handy and comfortable when playing. Let me add some effects. So that's the way that you can play on this thing, and then you might wonder, well, how to record some notes. Well, to do that, maybe let me clear this pattern. And well, to trigger some notes, to record some notes into the sequencer, there are various ways of doing that. So one of those is playing in real time and recording in the real time mode. So to do that, you have to press play. And now when I'm playing, you notice that nothing is being recorded because the record is not enabled. So if I enable record, suddenly everything that I've played is recorded into the step sequencer, containing the information about the pitch, the gait, and velocity as well, because those pads are velocity sensitive. So then you can play back your sequence in that way. Another way of recording notes into the sequencer is actually step programming. So the way it works is that you can just press some notes. Let's clear it again, and now let me just type in some steps, and then you can play it back that way. But you probably notice that it's just one note. So the way to change that is to take advantage of those knobs that are above the step sequencer. So as you can see, there are numbers next to each knob, and they have 3 different purposes. They work in 3 different modes, and you can change those modes or access those modes by using the little knobs button on the track. So maybe you don't see it, but there is a pitch, velocity, and gait mode that you can work with. So if the mode is set to pitch, the movements of those knobs will change the notes. And now you can see that I'm changing the pitch of step number 1, and you can see what note is being selected because the BeatStep Pro display is showing that. What's even cooler is that these are touch sensitive. So if I just, let me change it to a different note. If I touch the top of this knob, I can see what note is programmed or assigned to it. If I go here, I can see again that it's a different note than on this step. So again, you can imagine, maybe you remember the Pigments workshop that I did, where I was talking about how everything is connected visually, how easy it is to navigate because of the colors or the information that's assigned not only to the sound but also to the visual part of it. It is the same here, and you can see that this philosophy started way back in the day when we released that a few years ago. So there is a lot of stuff going on, but it's very easy to realize where you are or what is happening because everything is attached to colors. So if I play it back and then change some steps, step number 9, for example, 11, 13, 14. So that's the way that you can change the pitch information of the steps. You can also change their velocity. So maybe I can show you this on the drum sequencer. So to move around the sequencers and go back and forth is just to select those big buttons that says sequencer 1, sequencer 2, and drum. So let me find a blank drum sequence or pattern. Okay, cool. So it's the same for the drums. I can record stuff in real time, and now it's being played back. It's also good to remember that every note that is programmed in real-time recording mode is being quantized to the currently selected time division. And you can see those here. So below these pads, the last 4 pads, you have time divisions that go from 4ths, 8ths, 16ths to 30-second notes. So you program your notes in the same way for all the 3 tracks. So maybe let me show you the velocity on this shaker sound. Oh, I would forgot, there is another very cool way to program your notes, and this makes use of this great roller and looper. You can use it in different ways, and you can also change the behavior of that strip in the MIDI control center that I'll show you later on. And by default, it's set to looper, which basically loops the fragment of the music that is being played back when you trigger that looper, and it does it with time divisions that you can see here. But I am using it as a roller because in the melodic sequences it can do cool stuff which sounds like an arpeggiator. So if I press a chord, you know, so basically it repeats the note that you are actually playing at the time. And then what's cool is that you can record it back into the sequencer. So let me do it once again. I'm gonna use the metronome, which is, by the way, smartly in a very cool way, because basically there is no speaker on BeatStep Pro, as in, for example, as with KeyStep Pro. But the smart design is that when you enable the metronome, which you have to do with Shift and this button, now you can hear the metronome. And actually the sound that is doing the metronome comes from the drum sequencer, and it's that rim shot. You can also set it in the MIDI control center, where you can assign a certain note, basically a certain pad, to be used as the metronome. So I can, you know, toggle it on or off that way, which is very, very cool, because in lots of sequencers, you probably know that there's lots of sequencers without the metronome, which is usually a problem when you want to record in real time and you actually don't know where to start or what is going on. But it's not the case with this one. It's very easy to activate the metronome. So the cool way that I wanted to show you of programming sounds is to use the roller as a tool that will trigger this shaker. So now it's actually playing, and now I can show you how the velocity can be changed. So in the drum sequencer there are 3 modes, which are a bit different than from the melodics in the melodic sequencers. So in the melodic sequencer you have the pitch, velocity, and gate modes, and it depends on those modes what the knobs above the sequencer will do. So in the drum sequencer there are modes that are called shift, velocity, and gate. So if we set it to velocity and now change those knobs, you can probably hear that some of the steps became a bit more quiet. So now it's it's a bit more live and natural. It has a natural shuffle to it. Another mode that is available for those knobs is the gate mode. So you can change the gate information of the programmed steps. So let me maybe show this to you on the Mini Brute too. So maybe I'll take away a bit of the effects, go back here. So again, I'm going to record just one note. So it's just one note, and now I'm going to set the sequencer 1 to the gate mode. And now you can hear that some of the steps became shorter than the other ones. And in that mode, you can also do the slides. So if you turn this knob maximum to the right, it's going to become a slide, and you can see it on this display. And this one is quite important because it shows you all the values that you're currently selecting, whether it's notes, gate information, or the velocity information. You will see everything here. So you know, we can start just from this one note being recorded, and then we can start to manipulate it by changing its gate. It's still one note, the same note for all the 16 steps, but it's not as boring as it used to be. And now I can change the mode to the pitch, and now we can try to change the pitch. And then you can just delete some of the steps if the sequence is too dense for you, and that way you can start to, you know, build something that might end up as a cool sequence later on. So I'm gonna clear that. To clear a sequence, maybe I'll show you once again. To clear a sequence, all you have to do is have to press Shift and then the button number 1. So if you press this button, the sequence is gone now. Cool thing that I would like to show you as well is that you can create fast ties without actually using the gate mode built in the knobs. So if you press the button number 1 and then a button, the last step of this sequence, it's going to become a tie. And those steps that are following the first step, they will have the same pitch information as the bass note. So I said before that the sequence can be 64 steps long. So how do you do that? One of the ways is to extend the length of the sequence without copying the data that is in the first 16 steps on the page number 1 that you can see here. And then another way is to extend those steps without any information about the data, the pitch, the gates, and so on, without any events built into it. So the first way is to maybe let me just program something on the fly. Maybe we can go to the control mode and decide that we want some reverb or delay. Okay, we can come back now, and then so we have this one bar here, and now, for example, I would like to extend the sequence to 2 bars. So all you have to do is to use the last step and then move the arrows to the right, and then now we are on the page of the second bar. If I go with the left arrow, I am now here on the first bar. If I go here, I am now on the second bar, and then I can just select the note that will, the step that will be the last step for this sequence. So if I select the step number 16 on the 2-bar pattern, it means that now I have 2 bars of sequence, 2-bar sequence, and the first bar has notes in it, the second one does not. So I can, you know, build something else on this one. In the real time. So maybe I'm gonna add some claps. So very cool. So we have the kick and the snare on the first bar with some shakers, and on another bar we have a clap and a kick, which, you know, can be a breakdown, can be something to diversify your rhythms. So that's a way number 1. I'm gonna save this, and by the way, if you want to save anything here, all you have to do is you have to use this save button. So it's a very important button. Remember to save your patterns and projects. So if you would like to save if I would like to say what I've just did, all I have to do is to use save and then press one of the step buttons. And you can see that there is some information on the first 6 steps, which are basically my patterns that I recorded previously. So to save it, all I have to do is to press the step number 8, and then the display will tell me that it's being saved. And now, you know, I can go back and go to a different blank pattern and then move around those. To move around those, you can use these arrows that are below the display on each track. So you can navigate through your patterns, and if you can see that there are different informations for different patterns. So let's start again. I'm gonna build another sequence using the drum sequencer, and then we are going to extend it in a different way. This time the extension will include the events that are happening in the first bar, and they are going to be extended to the second, third, and fourth bars. So let's jam. Maybe let's go for the melodic sequencer. So what you hear is a microfreak, and the thing that I love about it the most is that, you know, with a single parameter, with a single change of the parameter, it can become, you know, super crazy. Alright, let's try to record something. So again, I press play. I'm gonna do it in real-time recording mode, and I need a metronome, right? Because, well, it's hard to record something without a reference point. So there is my metronome, which is again utilizing the D note, which is assigned to a rim shot. So if I would assign it to a snare, it would be a snare as the metronome. So let's try to play something. Alright, so I don't know what's gonna happen. Let's press record. Okay, we have something going on. As I mentioned before, now we can mess it up a little bit. Maybe change some pitch, some notes in the pitch dimension. So again, I select pitch, and then, for example, I want to change the pitch of the step number 9. So I go to the knob number 9, and then it's a G sharp. Maybe I would like to use it, set it to G, or maybe D sharp, or maybe an octave higher. Alright, that's cool. I can turn off the metronome. yeah, that's microfreak. The craziness that you hear is called microfreak. It's very freaky. All right, so coming back to the extension of the sequence. So now I would like to extend it to 64 steps, and I would like to have this the pitch information that I have on the first bar. So it's very easy. All you have to do is you have to press Shift and then use the same arrows to navigate within your sequence. So again, Shift, and then you set your length. I set it to 64 steps. And now the sequence is 64 steps. How do we know about this? Well, first things first is that you can see the sequencer going on the first bar, and then you don't see it anymore. And this means that it's going further. But there is a smart way to navigate that, which is called the follow mode, and you can activate it by pressing these two arrows. So now, once I pressed it, we are going to be, moving along the sequence. And you can also see this little red icon that's going in those above those arrows, and it means that it just shows you at which point you are in the sequence. And if I would like to change something along the way, I can do it easily on the fly. I can turn off the follow mode, and then I can just decide, you know what, I'm gonna go to the last fourth bar and I would like to do some changes here. So maybe I would like to delete those last steps. So maybe we can do some more changes, maybe program the last two steps and then use the knobs to set the pitch. So as you can see, there are multiple ways to program your notes, and then to build on top of that, to edit them and extend them, make them longer or make them shorter. Another very cool thing that is available here is the Polyrhythm Mode, and I'll show you this feature maybe on Mini Virtuoso this time. Let's go back and set appropriate effect amounts for this one. All right, so let's program a 1-bar sequence. Maybe I'm gonna use the roller again. That's like one of my favorite things in this one. So let's try to edit something now. Maybe I would like to, delete some steps because it might be too dense. All right, so the thing that I wanted to show you is the polyrhythm. So, well, it's polyrhythm when you think about the drum sequencer. In the melodic sequencers, it's just a way to shorten your steps to irregular numbers, so it can be even shorter than 1 bar. So the way to do it is to just use the last step button and then activate the step number 7 or 9, which basically, you use these buttons to set the length of the sequence, as I previously mentioned. So you can set it to 6 steps, and then maybe do some techno music. gate of some steps. So I'm gonna make a slide on the first one. You can hear the slide now. So as you can see, that's a very fast way to come up with something. I didn't mention this before, but you can also easily transpose all your sequences. So yeah, that's cool. Alright, so as you can see, it's very easy to just get lost and, you know, go very deep in your zone and start to jam and play on this. I have to tell you that that was my first hardware sequencer back in the day, a few years ago. When I finally got some money to, you know, spend on the hardware. Before I was just using Ableton and I was programming everything in Ableton and I was trying different controllers to, you know, get out of the very boring way of, like, you know, even playing your drums. And then this thing came up, I got it, and I remember that, you know, it was like a game changer for me, because suddenly I could become so expressive with my music and the way I was making my tracks, that, you know, completely changed the situation and the workflow. You can just, you know, start to play on it, and then you don't even know when you're lost in the music, and, you know, 2 hours are gone suddenly. And also one of the cooler things about it, when I first got it, was the fact that I could easily synchronize my Ableton with BeatStep Pro. So basically, this cable allows you to power up the unit, but also to sense the data and information. And the clock is very, very stable. I can easily, you know, control the tempo and start and stop transport section in Ableton, which allows me to record everything, you know, in the grid, on the grid, from here. So I wanted to show you the way to transpose the sequences. So there are two situations where you might want to do that. First one is where you just play when the sequencer is stopped. So to do that, you just use these two buttons where it says octave minus and octave plus. So when I press it, you know, octave plus, it goes up. And let me take out a little bit of that great delay and reverb. There's never enough of that. Alright, so that's one of the cases. Another case that you would like to, that you might need to do that, is when the sequence is playing, and then to transpose the sequence, you have to press the sequencer 1, and then again the same buttons. So this might be very useful, you know, when you're playing and you want to have control over your sequences and the way you're building your track. It becomes a very tactile and hands-on approach to do that, to change the octaves. Now I would like to show you, moving on, I would like to show you the polyrhythm on the drum sequencer, because that's a very cool way to step us away from the, you know, classic way of 4/4 patterns. So I'm going to change and mess up the shaker sequence, and then I will activate the polyrhythm by using shift and then pressing the last button on the step sequencer. And you can see that it's becoming lit when it's on. So now I can change the individual the length of the individual sounds in the drum sequencer. And if I use the last step button and then set the shaker to 7th step, it's gonna repeat after the 7th step, while everything else is playing on a different length. So that's very cool because for example, like with this clap, yeah, very handy way, very cool way to get a bit more creative with the patterns. Another thing that you need to know is the shift functions of the pads that are here. So I didn't mention this yet, but it's quite important. So let's go back to Microfreak. Just setting up some effects again. Why don't we change engine? Alright, let's go like this. So there are many different ways that you can use the shift button, and those ways, they will determine how your patterns will behave or sound. So you see the little text that it's written on white on this unit. This one is a black version, by the way. We usually release, the original BeatStep Pro and KeyStep and all of our products are in white, but sometimes we release those cool and extra black limited versions that, you know, end up in stores every now and then. So you might keep your eyes open. We might do that again if you would like to get hold of this cool black one. So there are information written on below the pads, and all of those things are secondary functions of those pads, and you can access them with the use of the shift button. So for example, let's take the pattern direction. If I place the sequence like this, it's a sequence that goes in the forward direction, but I can change it, I can reverse it. So all I have to do is to use shift and then press the reverse button. Yeah, I can also take advantage of the alternate mode, which means basically that the sequence will go forward and backwards. Another function that is available with the shift button. Oh, one more thing, you can also play with the triplets as well. Another function is the time division. So currently my sequence is playing at 16th notes, so I can change that easily to 8ths. And that's one of my favorite ways to create tension and, you know, do a breakdown in the track. When you're suddenly playing a bit fast, you can, for example, start to take away some drums. So that's the way that you can use it, for example. Also, I've showed you already the octaves, and the last thing are the scales. which is very important, and I use it all the time. So you have access to a few different scales: chromatic, major, minor, Dorian, Mixolydian, and harmonic. And you can change them with, again, using the shift and then selecting appropriate pad that represents a different scale, a certain scale. But my favorite thing here is the user scale. So if in the MIDI control center, you can set it up. If I can show you right now, if you go to device settings, at the very bottom, you have a user scale configurator. So basically, it means that you can, do an individual scale that you like. And then it becomes very important when you try to improvise or play live. Let me show you why. So maybe I'm gonna save this pattern. Again, do you remember saving the pattern? Save, and then you select one of the step buttons here. So now I'm gonna go to a empty patch, something like that. And now again, I'm gonna repeat myself and record just one note with the roller mode. And now, as you might imagine, if I go to the user mode, now suddenly I can completely forget about being in key and in scale, because every note, every note that I'm gonna find with those notes will be in key, because I am within my scale. And you can see those notes here, as I've said before. So if you combine all of this with, shortening it, the step, you can very easily and in a fast manner go from completely something blank to something that you might like, and then end up using in your productions. Another thing that you need to know about BeatStep Pro's drum sequencer is the individual mutes. This is very cool, and it helps you to build your tracks in a very cool way. So let me show you. Let's create something again. I have to tell you, it's very the way that it's built, it's very inviting to just start with blank patches and improvise all the time. All right, let's do this. All right, nice. Maybe some effects for the drums. All right, that should be cool. Let's add something else. What do we have here? All right, so now I have this sequence going on, and the way to mute individual sounds is that you have to press the drum and then, just press the pads that are assigned to drums that you would like to mute. So in this way I can mute everything, nothing is playing. And when I click the drum and mute again, it shows me which sounds are being muted. So now I can come back with the sequence and start to build the track in that way. And if you press the mute button again, it's gonna unmute everything. and you will know that some of the sounds are muted because the mute button will blink. So as you can see, I have muted the clap, and it shows me it's showing me that the sound is muted, so I can unmute everything again. So again, maybe let's start from scratch, and this time I will show you the randomness and probability and swing functions, because they are really game changers in this one. The way that they are designed is, you know, super cool, and it allows you to, you know, start from something very basic and end up with a very complex and abstract drum patterns, for example, which is the way that I like to use those functions. So let's start with, again, with drums. I don't want that rim shot, so I'll get rid of it. I have just this, and maybe so something very basic, just 4 sounds going. And now I can use the randomness and probability buttons, or maybe before I'm gonna add a bit of swing to it. 55 sounds cool. So now, the way it works is that the randomness basically changes the order of the notes, and the probability button, the knob, determines the chance of the randomness parameter influencing the sequence. So what I like to do is I love to set the probability to maximum, because then it will always randomize the sequence whenever I increase the value of the randomness. So the way I use it is I just hit play, and then I know that the probability is set to maximum. I wait until it plays like 2 bars, and then I do a very fast change of this. And you can hear that it's just adding random notes and sounds in a random way for this little short time that I increase this value. So let's see what it's gonna do to a drum sequence, melodic sequence. One thing I didn't mention is that you can use it globally, which is the default behavior, but you can use it only for a specific track, which is very, very handy. So I would like to use randomness and probability only on the drum track, which means that I can save a different set of settings of the probability and randomness per each track. And then I can, you know, if I go to Melodic Sequencer, I see that it's not enabled, which means that it's not acting in the same way as it acts on a drum sequencer. So let's see what's gonna happen here. I am increasing the probability to 100, setting the randomness to. I set my scale to the user scale, which means that whatever happens, it's always within the same scale. So I don't have to worry about being out of key. Maybe I can change the octave. If I go down with the probability, for example, if it's set to 30, the value 30, it means that it will influence this melodic sequence only in the 30% of the time that the sequence is being played. Quickly, before the Q&A, because we are running out of time, it goes so fast always. I would like to show you two more functions, which are transpose link and preset or pattern link, as we can call it as well. So basically it means that you can transpose two sequences at once by just transposing the sequencer number 2, for example. So let me find some patterns that will work. Maybe third one. Alright, so we can use this guy, and then for the microfreak, which one was that? So to transpose two sequences at the same time, all you have to do is to enable the transpose link, and now when they are playing, if I transpose the sequencer number 2, it's going to transpose the sequencer number 1 as well. So that's pretty handy when you are playing live and you have your patterns selected and prepared. And you can also use the preset link or pattern link, which will, well, do something cool as well. It will basically change the patterns together. So as you can see, I am changing the pattern for the drum sequence, for the sequencer number 1, and it's also changing the patterns in all of the 3 tracks, the 2 remaining tracks. And you can, in the MIDI control center, if you go and have a look at the top view, the top part of it, you can determine the behavior of it. So it can be absolute, which is this behavior. They are changing. The number is always the same for each track. And if I set it to relative, then if, for example, my starting position is, pattern number 2 for sequencer 1, 5th for sequencer 2, and 3rd for drum sequencer, then it's gonna go to another one in the order of the individual sequence. So that's pretty cool as well. What else we need to know? Chaining of the patterns. This is quite important because when playing live or just arranging your tracks, it's good to know how to change some patterns. So the way to do that is you have to press, for example, I'm going to show you on drums. Okay, so we have pattern number 2 and pattern number 3. They are different, so we can chain them and see how it's gonna end up. So to chain a pattern, you have to press Shift and then hold the drum or sequencer 2 or 1 buttons, and then basically you can leave the Shift button. It's important that you keep this one pressed, and then you can select the order. So I would like to play the sequence number 2 times, so 1, 2, and then sequence number 3 as well 2 times, 1, 2. Okay, so now let's see. All right, perfect. And you can chain those patterns in whatever order you want, and it works in the same way for sequencer number 1 and sequencer number 2. The top part here allows you to set the source of the MIDI, the synchronization source, so you can use the internal clock, the USB, MIDI, and clock, the voltage clock as well. All right, so I guess I've covered most of the things that I would like to show you. Obviously, it's a very deep machine, so I recommend you to check it out and have a little, insight into our website and all the tutorials that we've done for this. There is also a very cool thing that I would like to show before the Q&A. My friends at the marketing department some time ago, they've produced a very cool chart that hopefully you can see now on my screen. Yeah, so basically if you look at this, this is like a chart that allows you to know all the shortcuts and all the functions of BeatStep Pro. So it's called cheat sheet basically. So you can see all of the best functions and most important functions for each sequencer and how to use it as a controller. All right, so there are some questions that I can see. Let me try to answer them. Okay, so question number 1. Is there a way I can control different channels and trigger samples on session mode using only the BeatStep Pro and simpler on Ableton? Is there a way I can control different channels and trigger samples on session mode? Yeah, of course. I guess if I understand correctly, you can assign each channel to each track of BeatStep Pro to whatever channel you would like to use. So you can use it, you can do it. If I can show you on the screen again, if we go to MIDI Control Center, you can see that there are send and receive channels for each track. So you can set individual channels for each track and then you can assign those to your tracks in Ableton and trigger different samples, different VSTs or instruments that you have on those DAW tracks. Okay, another question. Is there a way to globally set the gates in sequencer 1 and 2? Let's say I have one step at 50 gate and I want all the other to be at 50. Yeah, so what you have to do is you have to use the combination of shift and knob number 1, which basically sets the relative, it shifts every step. And if you use shift and knob number 2, it's going to introduce the absolute shift. So each step will have the same value. All right, moving forward, question number 3. Does the randomness probability affect only the selected steps or all of the nodes? So it affects the steps that are, the nodes that are assigned to various steps, and it also changes the order of those steps. It doesn't change the pitch of the steps in the melodic sequencer, for example, but it's changing the gate and the order of those steps. Question number 4. Can we import a drum or melodic sequence from Ableton to BeatStep Pro, edit it and reload it to Ableton? Yes, you can do that. You have to, I'm not going to do it now because it takes some time, but if I can show you on Ableton again on my screen, hopefully you can see it. All right. So if you create a new MIDI channel, if you create a new MIDI channel, you can send the MIDI from Ableton. You can program something in your piano roll and then send it to BeatStep Pro, and it's going to receive the MIDI information in the track that you will select in your DAW. You can edit it, yes, and then you can send it back to Ableton again. So yeah, that's possible. I was actually using it in that way when I was trying to transfer my notes and melodies and MIDI from all of my projects to put it here for the live performances. So sometimes I produce stuff that's not done on this. I just program it for example, in Pigment's sequencer, and I love those patterns and those melodies, so then I would load them up to BeatStep Pro in that way. Okay, moving forward. I see there's a user scale function on BeatStep Pro. Can I add other musical scales quantizing options with it, like prig-in modes? So if we go to the MIDI control center again on my screen, what is possible is to use those notes that are here. So whenever the scale that you would like to use contains the notes that are here, you can set it up here. You can toggle on or off a certain note. So all the scales that are possible to build here are the scales that have those notes that are available here built in them. And then you can toggle them on or off. All right, another questions. Any plans to introduce polyrhythm per drum track? Well, I don't know, honestly. Maybe we might do it. You know, we always try to update our products and they are ever evolving and growing. But I don't know what might happen. It might be there. All I know is that we always try to make them better. So keep an eye on it and maybe that's gonna happen. Another question, I send clock from my BeatStep to a clock distributor in my modular system. The speed of that clock seems very fast. Is there a way of dividing that clock from within BeatStep? All right, so again, let me take you back to MIDI control center. And if you go and see the sync section, you can see that you have some options that you can change. So for example, you can change the pulses per quarter. So you can use the one step 24 pulses per quarter 48 or the 2 PPQ, which is a Korg system. So this is something that you can do in MIDI control center. Another question. Okay, that's another question. Thanks and congrats to Jakub for his excellent demos and beats. Thank you guys. It was a pleasure as always to talk with you and spend some time with you. Please have a look on our channel, YouTube channel and Facebook. We are going to be doing some more live streams pretty soon. So you might find it interesting and cool. And yeah, stay safe, keep on making great music, and then I'll leave you off with just a little jam at the end. So yeah, thank you very much.
Wow.